Dr. Philippa Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Worldwide, obviously, we're looking at about 80,000 cases, which is 10 times the number that we saw with SARS, suggesting this is a very infectious condition. So will the UK Government liaise with international partners to ensure accurate reporting? Because it will be critical to map the spread of this, and there will be a danger some countries under-report because they will be afraid of economic impacts. Is any consideration being given to using actually thermal detection technology at Heathrow so that actually that could be spread across more sites? Because we can no longer just think it's only people coming from a few countries. Really, people can be following different routes, and therefore almost everyone would need to be screened who's coming in. Obviously, preventing or containing the initial spread, as the Secretary of State spoke about, there's only a very small window of opportunity where that is possible. And one of my concerns I raised the last time is not self-isolating asymptomatic people, particularly when we're aware that the case that spread to others in the UK was someone who was not significantly symptomatic. We don't know what the prodromal phase is, and therefore people could be spreading this condition when we don't know. So the advice really needs to be clear. Does he recognise the confusion there is now that if you're coming back from certain parts of North Italy, you must self-isolate even if asymptomatic, but if you're coming from China, you don't need to self-isolate if you're asymptomatic? And I think that's really causing confusion, and we may end up behind the curve when, if containment is going to work, you have to be ahead of the curve. Obviously, self-isolating does not count as illness. So will the government send a clear message to employers so that those who are advised to self-isolate will still be paid or receive sickness cover? Because otherwise there will be people who will feel they must go to work because they simply can't afford to have no income for 2 weeks. Now, the Secretary of State suggested he wouldn't go to wider northern Italy, and the Chief Medical Officer suggested people with health conditions shouldn't. But travel insurance only kicks in if the Foreign and Commonwealth Office gives a very clear guidance. So will that guidance be changed to actually make it that people shouldn't be travelling to wider northern Italy and indeed other areas, so that people are again not disadvantaged by not having travel insurance if they choose not to put themselves and indeed all of us at risk of spread?
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady is right about concerns about under-reporting, especially in some countries. I'm afraid that I don't recognise some of her clinical observations about this, and I don't recognise the idea that we should change travel advice between China and Italy. What we should do is base travel advice on the clinical evidence based on the experts. And I'm very happy to ensure that she gets a full briefing from the medical experts to ensure that she gets the clinical points right. On thermal detection, rather like stopping the flights, this is against clinical advice. The clinical advice is not to undertake thermal detecting because you get a lot of false positives. And indeed, the only country in Europe that undertook thermal detection at the border that I know of was Italy, and it has now been the scene of the largest outbreak. Finally, a very important point about people in work and who go to self-isolation. Self-isolation on medical advice is considered sickness for employment purposes. It's a very important message for employers and for those who can go home and self-isolate as if they were sick because it's for medical reasons.